Our speaker this morning has covered Georgia politics and other aspects of public life for, I guess, more than 30 years, maybe more than 40 years. He's probably the only person that was the editor of the Emory newspaper and the University of Georgia student newspaper. Not many people know that in 1962, Bill Shipp left the Atlanta newspaper briefly and went to work for the Federal Water Pollution Control Administration. And some of you will remember that was a forerunner of the Environmental Protection Agency. Bill Shipp is a reporter, he is an editor, he is an author, and he's also a businessman. Just during the course of his week, he is the president of Word Merchants, which is a publishing company that produces Bill Shipp's Georgia, which most of you read that newsletter. He's also now an associate editor of Georgia Trend magazine. He's a founding director of Longstreet Press, which is a book publishing company. He writes a twice-weekly column that appears in more than 60 newspapers in Georgia. He hosts Bill Shipp's Journal on Georgia Public Television, and he's a regular weekly panelist on the Sunday news conference that many of you also watch. He has probably been the most cussed and discussed reporter in the history of the state of Georgia. And I know for a fact that he has been called every bad name that has ever been invented, because I've called him every one of those names myself. This guy had sources when I worked in state government that I think lived in the walls, because we would have private conversations in the governor's office, and 3 days later they would appear in the paper. And to this day, I don't believe Governor Busby or Governor Harris or any of us that were involved in those conversations still know how he was able to get stories that he was able to get. I've known Bill a long time, since I joined George Busby in 1974, and we've been friends and we've actually been enemies. I've been with Bill when he's had family joys, and I've been with Bill when he's had family sorrows. And the common thread between Bill and each of you and any liberal in this state and anyone who likes politics and anyone who doesn't like politics, the common thread that Bill Shipp has is he has tried to do things in his job, his writing profession, that would somehow, some way make government better, make Georgia better, so that his children and our children could grow up in a better state. He's the father of 2 grown daughters, and it's my pleasure to introduce my friend Bill Shipp.
You have just heard what is by far the kindest thing that Tom Perdue has ever said about me. Two men that I know back in March decided they were going to take a hot air balloon ride. This was during the great blizzard. So they went up in the hot air balloon and started flying across the country, and they got lost in the clouds. And as the day began to fail and the sun started to go down, they became very concerned that they were lost. And finally, they descended through the clouds, and they had no idea where they were, but they saw a man in the field. And they shouted down to the man, "Where are we?" And the man looked up and shouted back, "You're in a balloon." So they floated on a little further, and one of the men turned to the other and said, "Do you know who that was?" He said, "No, who?" He said, "That was a trained journalist." Said, "How do you know?" He said, "Because the information he gave us was fairly accurate, but totally worthless." Well, I hope what I tell you this morning will not be totally worthless. I'm going to make a few brief remarks, and then if we have time, I'd like to have some discussion, questions, brickbats, or whatever. I don't have to tell you, these are a very interesting time in American and Georgia politics. That is a polite way of saying these are also dangerous times. At the national level, many of us believe we have lost direction, at least temporarily. At the state level, we are in a period of upheaval that is almost revolutionary. The suburbs are in ascendancy. The rural areas of our state continue to decline as a force in politics and government. and the core cities have become islands unto themselves. Many of us have yearned for a long, long time for a two-party system. Well, we have it now, but that may be only a temporary state. If my friend Doug Bachtel, the University of Georgia demographer, is correct, we may have a one-party system again by the end of this century, except the ruling party then will not be Democratic, it will be Republicans. If present population trends continue in Georgia, there is good reason to believe that the majority of both houses of the legislature will be in the hands of the Republicans by the year 2000. And so will many, if not all, of our statewide offices. The baseline Republican vote is now approaching 50%, and it may be rising. Demographic shifts are not the only reason Republican strength is growing. Last year's legislative and congressional reapportionment, sanctioned by the Justice Department and George Bush's Justice Department and applauded by black Democratic leaders, resegregated the state's lawmaking districts. Now we have overwhelmingly majority black districts where only black Democrats can hope to be elected. But in order to draw those districts, we had to create lily-white enclaves where no black and no liberal Democrat can hope to be elected. And those lily-white districts are in the vast majority. Civil rights groups are now pushing the courts and the Justice Department to avoid the state's runoff election system, and that is certain to happen probably within the next few months. That also will result in solid gains for minority voters. But like last year's reapportionment plans, it is more likely to aid conservative voters. The end of runoff elections will mean, for instance, that a white candidate will have a real chance of being elected mayor of Atlanta before the end of the century. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Next year's state election contests are beginning to take shape. Republicans now hold 4 U.S. House seats and 1 U.S. Senate seat. They have a good chance of winning at least 2 more House seats in next year's elections. That would give the Republican Party a majority of the Georgia congressional delegation for the first time in history. 7th District Rep. Buddy Darden and 10th District Representative Don Johnson may find themselves in deep trouble before the 1994 balloting. Not so much because they voted for President Clinton's deficit reduction plan, but because the Republican parties in their districts have grown in strength and stature. The best hope for these congressmen, and it is not a far-fetched one, that the Republicans once again will nominate extremist challengers. Georgians do not elect extremists from either party, extremists on any issues to any office. That is an irrefutable, history-tested maxim. Let's talk about the governor's race. That election is 17 months away, and we already have 4 announced candidates. Zell Miller and Murray County Representative Judy Pogue for the Democrats, Johnny Isakson and John Knox for the Republicans. I know that some of you disagree, but I believe that Isakson right now is the best candidate the Republicans could hope to offer against Zell Miller. Isakson is a centrist businessman, a consensus builder, and yes, a veteran, tested politician who has been able to deliver the goods for his Cobb County district from a Democratic-dominated state House and Senate. Some of you may say that Isakson lacks fire and is too cool to handle Miller, but I submit he is now the quality of the Republican pool of candidates. John Knox, the former mayor of Waycross, should not be discounted. He is a nice man and a complete conservative ideologue. He certainly will have some appeal, perhaps not enough to unhorse Isakson, but enough to force Isakson to take stands he might otherwise eschew. Although there is talk that Insurance Commissioner Tim Riles might challenge Miller, I would not bet on that. And while the polls show Miller has serious problems at the moment, don't count on those obstacles remaining in place up until election time. Despite changes in demographics, Zell Miller will be the toughest gubernatorial candidate to place his name on the ballot since Jimmy Carter ran in 1970. Here's what Johnny Isakson or anybody else will have to overcome to take the governor's share away from Miller. 1, money. A serious candidate for governor will need millions to compete. Zell Miller raised $7 million in his 1990 campaign. He can raise $10 million this time. He now has out-of-state cash sources that would not get near him 4 years ago. Senator Jay Rockefeller has promised to help him. So has much of the local and national Jewish community. Back here, Virgil Williams, Miller's finance chairman in 1990, and Ovid Davis, his campaign treasurer, already are revving up this campaign. They will be joined in the money collection game by former Congressman Ed Jenkins. 2, Miller has power and he knows how to use it. Bill Clinton should take lessons from Zell Miller on getting his way in politics. As governor, Miller has used every grant, favor, and every dollar from his emergency fund to curry support for his administration. Terms for members on most state boards run 6 years, yet Zell Miller in just 2 years has manipulated the board so that he controls a clear majority of appointments on the Board of Regents, Human Resources, Corrections, Public Safety, World Congress Center, Industry and Trade, and patronage is the mother's milk of power. He has twice muscled the rigidly independent Transportation Board to do his bidding. He forced the DOT Board to accept Wayne Shackelford as its commissioner. Then he turned around and forced them to rescind a raise for Shackelford. Miller is ruthless. He will be 62 years old soon, so you might believe that he is mellow. Wrong. He sits up nights working on his get-even list, real and imagined. His current role of villains include the elitist Atlanta newspapers, and Miller refers privately to nice man John Knox as the windbag from Waycross. The governor, who speaks with a hillbilly twang, says the Atlanta news media don't like where he comes from or how he sounds. Others on Miller's grudge list: a dozen legislators who opposed him in 1990, then buttered him up when he won, then turned on him when they decided a few months ago that he was going to be a lame duck. He also has taken aim at high-ranking officials in the education bureaucracy who failed to step smartly on his orders. And of course, Johnny Isakson has risen to the #1 spot on Miller's enemy list. To Miller, politics is nearly a blood sport without many rules. He has run 6 statewide races, 2 congressional campaigns, and 2 drives for the state Senate. He is engaged in more legislative battle than any other presently active politician. A Miller adversary in 1994 had better be prepared to walk some mean streets and fend off the most personal kind of attacks. And his record, finally. Despite his gaffes in trying to change the state flag and some negative fallout from the lottery, Miller's tenure has been mostly free of scandal, certainly no major scandal. Considering the condition of much of the nation, Georgia's economy is mostly in sound shape and promises to improve. Miller has a substantial record which, with the help of expert spin doctors, could be made to glow on television. Beating Miller will not be easy in 1994, his proximity to Bill Clinton and the lottery notwithstanding. By this time next year, the lottery may be a big plus for the governor, and Bill Clinton could be the hero of the hour. That does not mean that the incumbent governor cannot be defeated. It simply means he will be extremely difficult to knock over. There may be some other opportunities in state government. Pierre Howard looks like a lock for lieutenant governor, and Mike Bowers, I suspect, can be attorney general for as long as he wishes. But there are opportunities on the Public Service Commission, and Bob Baker, the Republicans' first statewide official in an executive role, has done a remarkable job on that commission. Despite the apparent opportunities for advancement in the executive branch of state government, My guess is that you will see the greatest changes next year in the legislature and the congressional delegations. As for the issues you will hear some about changing the flag again, but as most of you know, that is a hollow topic. You will hear lots about taxes and tax reform and the way we finance education. And you may hear much about the ineffectiveness and costliness of state government. Insurance Commissioner Riles touched on that topic a few weeks ago in a speech. He suggested that the state merit system be abolished, and the sparks flew. You also may hear more thoughtful discussion of public education, not just heeding the cries from teachers' unions for more money, but some talk about what is really wrong with our state school systems, like poor teacher education and such. In any event, we're on the brink of closing out this century with an interesting round of elections that could usher it in, for the first time, a genuine two-party state government. And I hope that occurs. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, comments, brickbats, I'll be glad to answer them or duck them or whatever.
Do you think your Howard will run again?
Yes, I do. But I think it's also interesting to note that he has established a law practice, or is in the process of establishing a law practice on the side. We haven't seen that happen in the Lieutenant Governor's office since Zach Geer and George T. Smith were Lieutenant Governors, so that's certainly an option for him.
Bill, do you think that we'll follow North Carolina in the primary? I think you have to have a 40%, was what the court ruled up there, to be the nominee from a party, driving it from 50. Do you think that's a course we'll take?
What I've heard, Jim, it appears to me that's what we're going to do, because over the rest of the country where there are no runoffs, they always have a floor, and it's always in the 40% category. So what could happen in Atlanta, it could happen in the 11th Congressional District at Cynthia McKinney. You could get a conservative white go against several minority candidates. The conservative white is the only white running. He puts together 40% of the vote, he wins. And that could happen in Atlanta, particularly.
But you think the four will be about in the 40%?
About 40, right, that's my guess.
Will James Carville run Zell Miller's campaign?
Miller says no, but that he will call on Carville to help him from time to time. He says that Carville's partner, Begala, who wrote the famous flag speech and also wrote the keynote speech for Miller, will be very active in his campaign.
Let me preface this question. I think Georgia Trend is a very good magazine, especially from a business perspective.
Thank you.
But if there is such a thing as editorial fairness, what should the gubernatorial candidates expect in terms of editorial fairness on the magazine that's owned Virgil Williams and his relationship with Governor Zell?
Well, in my role as associate editor, I'm also editing the politics in that magazine. Virgil Williams so far has made no suggestions to me. He's frowned at me a couple of times, especially when I said that Miller was a political klutz of 1992 and 1993 also. As long as I'm associated with it, and I think this is Virgil's feeling also, it'll be down the middle and give you an accurate and objective appraisal of what's going on. We also reported in our poll that only 35% of the respondents wanted Miller to seek re-election. That didn't please Virgil either, but we ran it.
Would you comment on the relationship between Zell and Speaker Murphy and how you see that evolving with
Well, as you know, over the years, the Speaker and Zell have had very strained relationships. Murphy had a scare, and I don't know why he was scared, but he had a scare last year when a challenge was mounted. It turned out that the challenge was very ineffective, but he thought that Miller was the man behind the challenge. I don't know whether he was or not, but I sense that relationship may be healing, but I also sense that Murphy is about to wind it up, maybe one more term, and that'll be the end.
You think that State Park up in Miller's area is going to be a black mark against him?
I think you're going to hear an awful lot about that state park in the coming months, but you're also going to hear him defend it, and I think he puts up a pretty effective defense. That is a very poor region of the state. They need the jobs, they need the work, but I think it will be used against him a great deal. But I suspect what's really going to be used against him, if Bill Clinton's performance does not improve markedly, is Bill Clinton's going to be used against him. If you look at that special Senate race out in Rockdale and out in Newton County, Bob Gould, in his advertising, attached his opponent to Bill Clinton and Zell Miller. And I think he struck a chord there.
Bill, could you give us your thoughts on the coming mayor's race in Atlanta?
That is yet to shake down, and there is a great deal of talk in the business community about getting Andy Young to run again, and I suspect if he does run again, that he would be the favorite as soon as he steps in. There is also a lot of people, particularly bond lawyers, who would like to see Maynard seek re-election. That's not a slam at bond lawyers. I would say right now the establishment choice is probably Myrtle Davis. My choice is Eldrin Bell. He would be one of the few mayors in the country who looked like a Mexican general. Is there one more? We've got time for a couple more.
On the city of Atlanta, you about a year or two ago in Georgia Trend, you wrote a thoughtful essay or column about Atlanta and its status with respect to other major cities in the Southeast. I recall you compared it to Charlotte, North Carolina, and the tone of it was somewhat pessimistic, I would say. Do you have any thoughts on the future of Atlanta with respect to its other Southeastern counterparts?
Well, Atlanta's got to achieve the politically impossible if it's going to continue to be number one in the Southeast. It's going to have to expand its tax base. It's going to have to expand its boundaries. At some point, very soon, it seems to me Atlanta and Fulton County are going to have to consolidate. As most of you know, the last census showed that Charlotte, North Carolina now has a larger population than the city of Atlanta. The city of Atlanta's population continues to grow poorer. Charlotte's population is stabilized and more affluent. But that's not only true of Charlotte, that's true of several population centers around the South. In addition to that, some of these other population centers are rapidly becoming air transportation hubs that rival Atlanta. Something has got to be done about that airport. And I don't know whether the city of Atlanta has the wherewithal to fix the airport, or even to fix the sewers and the bridges for that matter. But that airport is crying to be upgraded, repaired, to get another carrier in there. And it seems to me that one solution to that is to make it into a state agency or state authority. And this gentleman over here says that'll never happen, and he may be right.
What do you know about the outer perimeter as far as being shut down or continued or?
The outer perimeter probably is going to be a major issue in next year's election. You may see the Miller administration that has really pushed the outer perimeter start to back away from accelerating that. A lot of the reason for that is the inner city media, the Atlanta newspapers, and a lot of Atlanta businessmen seeing creating a new playground for developers 50 or 60 miles out is detracting from the city. But I can tell you from personal experience, if you live on I-75 in North Cobb County, have to come in every day, you can't wait till they get that started. And I think a lot of people up there who have no vested interest feel the same way. Thanks very much. I enjoyed being with you.